Hello to anyone that might be on Zoom. Okay, so presentation is a loose term for what I'm gonna do. It's more of a guided storytelling is what I'm gonna do a little bit. I'll provide a little bit of motivation for why I find this important, and then talk just a little bit about what Oklahoma State does to try to prepare our graduate students to be better professors and teachers down the road. So my background, originally did my undergrad at the University of Kentucky, and I was an animal science ag econ double, and I got my interest in teaching then, and I was lucky enough the animal science department let undergraduate students who had already passed the animal science classes teach the lab sections. So I actually got to teach hands-on animal science classes, and I was like, this is fun. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that animal science professor did a really good job mentoring me in teaching the lab section. It wasn't just go show up and grade papers. It was you put together the quiz, you put together the content for the session that you wanted to cover and make sure the students know the objectives. And so I learned that teaching is more than just grading and kind of standing in front of the classroom really early on, but that kind of excited me and I thought that was cool. I went on to do my master's in at University of Arkansas, and then went and worked for the University of Maryland in extension and did extension version of teaching, which is pretty similar to what we do in the classroom, but to a slightly more diverse, broad audience. And so I learned more skills there. But what you're kind of seeing here is I learned these skills on the job, which may not be the most efficient or best way to benefit our field as a whole. So I started being like, maybe we should start teaching some of these skills a little earlier, building them into our programs. I went on and got my PhD at Kansas State University, but in between there, I actually taught just my master's at the University of Arkansas. And that the phrase when the department had introduced me to the college was, Hannah's new here, baptism by fire. She's teaching 5 classes in the fall. And that was 2 weeks before school started. And so it was in fact trial by error for me. Thankfully, I love it and I'm passionate about teaching and agriculture. So it was, I could take the punches as they came. But again, it became very evident that maybe we shouldn't be learning most of these skills on the job, and that we need to pad these things in. So I went on, got my PhD at Kansas State, where I taught again, thankfully. But again, I was the graduate teaching assistant who had prior teaching skills or experience. I don't know about skills quite yet. But I found the department often sent other grad students to me for guidance, which is great, but it's also a little bit of blind leading the blind. And so I'm not sure that's also a great structure for how we, again, advance our field and bring in new students into our pipeline. And so I'm pretty passionate about that. My teaching position at Oklahoma State is 65% teaching, 35% research, mostly undergraduate classes in agribusiness and farm management. But I also get to dabble in helping prepare our graduate students for teaching with our teaching practicum, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Because I'm interested in what our graduate students think and feel, because I think that's, we're we study people and the decisions they make. I think too often we don't actually ask the students their opinions, what they like, what they don't like, how they feel. We try to avoid feelings too often, I think, in academia, but it's important to recognize maybe how people feel. You don't have to agree with it, but so what are graduate students saying? We did a survey in 2021, it kind of overlapped into 2022. We sent it out broadly to graduate programs all across the US, and I think we had Canada, China, maybe with some other responses that we got for our survey, just to ask them some questions in different areas. Specifically, we were looking at teaching, research, leadership, and mentorship training. And the whole kind of gig of this research was the difference between experience and expertise. A lot of our graduate students get experience teaching, but was that experience good? Do they actually leave with skills? Because we teach our students skills in economics, right? We want you to become an expert, but then you're going to go on, and not all, but a lot of our students will go on and get jobs that require you to teach at least some percentage of your job, and you have no expertise at all in teaching, but you had experience because they threw you in a class and you wung it. And so we wanted to kind of support our argument that maybe we need to do a little bit better job. So we put that survey out. I'm not going to rehash this here, we'll hopefully have a paper come out. But some of the quotes from it were that teaching assistants are becoming more of graders and actually getting mentored in the field to teach students. And this particular respondent also put their overall graduate student experience rated it out of a three out of 5. This particular student was one end, not having a good time. Then there's the flip of that, where getting in the classroom, teaching convinced them they wanted to become a professor, and they had a 5 out of 5 experience. So we have our grad students that are like all kind of over the board, but it's impacting the choices that they make that will impact our profession. So I already said this a little bit. We know our students, especially our PhD students, have the expertise, the economic knowledge, but what they don't know anything about is the art of teaching, the communication, syllabus structure, curriculum development, all of those types of teaching elements that come into it. But what I found were some other things. Like, okay, I knew I would need to develop a syllabus. I'd have to make quizzes, but there's lots of other things that happen in the classroom that we do not prepare our graduate students to address. So this is a picture. I have permission from all these students they signed. This was from the University of Arkansas when I taught there. Does anyone notice anything funky in this picture? So yeah, sort of. What are these guys doing? Yeah. Do you think maybe they're talking during an exam? Check each other's test out? Yeah. This is the third time. I'd already warned them twice. So I snapped a pic, kicked them out, okay? So there's other things we are not preparing our graduate students for, in addition to syllabus and curriculum development. There are so many other aspects that go into teaching that our graduate students are expected to deal with, or they're expected to figure it out when the problem happens. And that is, again, not the method that we want our students. So how to deal with cheating in the classroom. Mental health for your students. Someone in there is having a bad day. More than one person is having a bad day. Someone's family is getting divorced or is in financial stress, or someone is sick, or they have no money themselves and they're having to sleep at a friend's house. Conflict management. 2 students in this class, their parents were state legislators on opposite parties, and their parents hated each other. I didn't know. I was new to Arkansas. My seating chart put them next to each other. Conflict. It was tense. I made them stay next to each other and we talked about it, okay? But I had to figure that out on my own with zero sort of mentorship and guidance. IEPs, individual education plans, our students come in and have a lot of needs that you have to help support, provide them resources. Universities usually help you with that, but you still have to learn the terminology, how to deal with them on a human level, and make them feel comfortable. A lot of students don't want to necessarily tell you that they have individual needs, even if it's a doctor's note type of thing. Classroom safety. When I was at the University of Arkansas, there was a campus incident that put our classroom on lockdown. And I was like, I don't know the plan, but I'm gonna stand in front of the door and hope no one comes through. And so we don't teach our graduate students how to deal with that. Diversity and inclusion is extremely important in the classroom. You look at this picture, and I know I looked at my class when I got to Arkansas, and I was like, white, right? Especially in our field of agriculture. And then this is a farm management class, so it's even less diverse. It was mostly men, white men, and then the next largest category was white females. So in my mind, I immediately put up, I was like, oh, geez, no diversity here. That's false, right? There's extreme diversity here. I've got extremely poor students, first-gen students, and also just because you have the appearance of being Caucasian does not mean you are fully Caucasian. And so there is diversity here, and you have to flesh that out in teaching a graduate student how to recognize and appreciate and incorporate that into your classroom. Again, it's not something you're going to get when you've been thrown into the classroom and you're literally just trying to teach them that the supply line is upward slope, right? So we have some holes. So how do we break this cycle of pumping economically trained people through the system and then throwing them in the classroom, and then it's just kind of confounding the issue over and over again? So don't want to be dramatic, but how do we break that cycle? Well, we need schools that are going to incorporate the importance of teaching and kind of build that expectation into their programs. But I also say that knowing some places are not going to do that, and we have to, as graduate students, you're going to have to do it yourself a little bit. So you have to be determined to be better. My biggest suggestion is to find a mentor and then find resources. Again, hopefully your university provides you some. I'm going to try to suggest some or show some that Oklahoma State uses. But there are resources out there. There's the NACTA organization that can really provide a lot of workshops and trainings and experiences to help you develop your teaching skills. That's on a national level. Most universities also have an education college that run their own programs or teaching certificate type of training, so you can get a kind of a verification. So find those resources at your university, and if you can't find them, talk to your mentor and ask them for advice. Specifically, what Oklahoma State does is we have a teaching practicum. It's targeted towards our PhD students that we expect to go into academia. It is not required, but it is an option, especially for ours that are on that academic track. So in order to do this teaching practicum, it's a 1 credit hour, just to have a placeholder. So it's built into their credits so that you can actually do some work, because we know our grad students are busy, but this is extremely important. We wanted them to get credit for some of this extra work and skills that they're developing. So for that 1 credit hour teaching practicum, they are assigned, they get to help pick with the department head who they want to work with. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just one faculty member. So our department head, who she herself is an excellent teacher and has won lots of awards and is very focused on making sure the students that come out of our department are prepared for teaching. She kind of runs our teaching practicum program, but she helps match students with other faculty that are in their teaching fields. So I'm assigned this semester with a student who's teaching farm management. I also teach farm management. So I'm getting to help shepherd her through her own development of farm management in her own section. Doesn't need to be like mine. I will share my materials and guide her, show her what I do, but she gets to develop her own stuff. So we assign mentors, and then we help guide the student through the design and construction of the class. It's not my experience where I was just handed, here's the binder, go teach this decision tools class, and I taught them word for word what everyone had taught for the last 5 years, and I left, right? That was not expertise. That was experience, but it was not expertise. So we work with the student to help them design and construct their syllabus, their course curriculum, their structure of their class, but building into that, and I'll show my syllabus in a second, they're developing their own teaching philosophy in the process. That is typically one of the quote unquote assignments that the students have to complete during this teaching practicum, is they have to draft up their teaching philosophy. One, it's important for how you want to define yourself as a teacher. Secondly, it's often required in our interview process if you're applying to teaching positions. So why not go ahead and start drafting one now? Your teaching philosophy will change. If it doesn't change, you're not doing teaching right, or you're not pushing yourself to develop yourself as a teacher. And so always reviewing that type of reflection as you go through the teaching. Especially with the student, we meet with them weekly. If they implemented a policy in the class, maybe there was a problem, an issue with cell phones. So they implemented a policy to try to correct that problem. Meet with the graduate student the next week and say, well, how does that new policy working? How do you feel? Let's talk about it. And then reflect on, do we need to amend that policy? Do we need to make changes? So it's on a week-to-week check-in basis with our students. So I'm really gonna focus though, I think finding a mentor is pretty easy, hopefully. You should have good teaching faculty in your departments. I know of at least one really good teacher at every school. So find that mentor that's willing to work with you and help you build your own teaching philosophy. The design and construction part is where it takes a lot of time, especially if you're not from an educational background. There's terminology people use, and you're like, what does that even mean? And so that's where you can work with other resources at your university, like the Education College. At the Oklahoma State University, they have the ITLE, which is like the Institute for Teaching and Learning. And I use them all the time. And I've taken a class with them every semester while teaching and attempting to do my research. That has pushed me to become a better teacher. And those exist at most of our universities. So I'm going to sit on that design and construction section for a minute in the next few slides, but that review and reflect is what's really the most important. Because if you're not modifying what you're doing or considering it's working or it's not, then you might be missing some holes. So this is my syllabus for our Introduction to Agricultural Economics class. This is not what syllabi looked like when I was an undergrad. They looked more like what the university requires, where they kind of send you the template and it's a white box and fill it in and you follow, and it's got the tornado safety warnings and all of that stuff, right? So I still have that syllabus. Okay, I follow the rules. My department head's here now. I follow the rules. I follow the platform, the template we're given, have all of that. I revamped the syllabus to this. Why? And I hate that this is what it is, because I'm a little bit staunch old school. I grew up with the white syllabus and I used it and I read it. Our students today are not that way. Okay, if you don't market your class and make it clean and fun to look at, they will never read your syllabus. And when you've got 4 or 5 classes with 200 students in them, you need them to read the syllabus. And so this was a class I went through with the ITLE at Oklahoma State, and it was specific to how to redesign some aspect of your class. You could choose a syllabus, you could choose an assignment, you could choose the structure of your class if you wanted, and they helped you work through that throughout the course of the semester. So this was kind of the end product, but it seems so simple looking at it. When I was doing it, they were like, okay, the course description box on the university's required template that they give you, course description. It's the same paragraph that's been there for 25 years that describes the class, right? Redo it in your own words and call it, why take this class? Find a way to quote unquote jazz it up and make it more attractive to the students. Make your success points. So this is kind of like my classroom expectations. I expect you to attend, apply what we're doing in our kind of class participation style, and then I'm going to assess you. It's important. Assessment's important. It's how I know if you're getting it. So telling them that's how you succeed. Show them some parts of the textbook. No student ever wants to buy the textbook, right? So you've got to, and I need them to, because I can't give them all the information in the class. So you're going to have to reference it. So find a way to make them want to buy the textbook. Make the evaluation structure, so the points, how you assess them, really, really clear and really, really succinct. I try, my grading structure section on the syllabus is way too long, and they help me shorten this up. But I never would have thought that if I hadn't utilized that resource with ITLE. And then also academic integrity and accommodations. This was something I mentioned a little bit earlier about how you have to really learn to be flexible within your university's policies, but also your teaching philosophy. I know I've come to realize a lot of our students do utilize the university's formal process for getting accommodations. We also have students who need the accommodations and cannot go through that because they either cannot afford to go get it documented through a doctor, or they don't want to because they're afraid of stigma. And that's something I've had to build into my teaching philosophy of like, how can I still provide those accommodations for those students to help them get the material that is still quote unquote fair and equitable to the rest of my class. And so redesigning kind of that section of the syllabus really made me also go back and adjust my teaching philosophy. And that has helped me kind of push me along in my teaching development. This is the last page of my syllabus, and this was something that I thought was crazy to me again, because I was like, who doesn't know what office hours are? Like, what? It's office hours. You come to the office during these hours. And I was so adamant. I was like, wait, come talk to me. I'm so friendly. I'm so approachable. No. If there is one student in my class who does not understand office hours, I have failed. And that is my teaching philosophy. Okay, because I want them to understand what are office hours. Why should you come talk to me? It should not only be when there's a problem or you have a question. And so one of the things I did before this redesign was instead of calling them office hours, I called them coffee and snack hours. But I can't afford to feed all the kids when they come during coffee and snack hours. So now it's just like candy, so it's a candy bowl. So I'm probably contributing to diabetes in Oklahoma, but they're coming to my office for the good reasons. And I've watched it change. I've only been in Oklahoma for a year now, right? To yesterday was my full year at Oklahoma State. And I watched it change from the fall when I had my normal boring syllabus to the spring when I had this syllabus. It's been a significant change. And that's something that curmudgeon old Dr. Shear, who's used to the white syllabus, would have been like, there's no way that if I make my syllabus pretty, more students are going to show up to office hours. I'm going to get less emails about things. It significantly changed our classroom environment. I also had students come up and talk to me that are a part of our Native American student group or African American, and came up and they said they appreciated their diversity that they saw in those pictures, and the inclusive language that I use in explaining things, because a lot of them were also first gen students. And that was something that ITLE helped me incorporate into my syllabus, like office hours, explaining what that means. And just making sure that your personality comes through in the syllabus. But again, that is one part, right? That is one part of teaching, is the syllabus development. And I spent an entire semester doing that one component. So it's impossible to incorporate all of that for our graduate students that are going to go on to be teachers into their program, right? Because we want them to be getting the economic knowledge. But we can help them gain the expertise and the confidence to find ways to do these as they go through. And I think Oklahoma State does a good job by utilizing their teaching practicum program. So that's all I have. I'll leave it for questions, or we can do questions at the end. Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there were other things that I changed. So this was not like there was no control. I didn't teach one class terribly and the other class better to like prove there was a difference. But that going through that class with ITLE definitely changed the way, the language I use, being more patient in the classroom when a student or a certain group of students is not understanding a concept. Again, I was a bit more traditional. I'm like, we're rolling, use the textbook and figure it out. And just being like, you can still have high expectations, right? We want our students to meet these goals, but sometimes you need to provide a little bit more resources, be a little bit more flexible. And that ITLE class, that while it was only focusing on redesigning one component, that definitely found its way into assignments and my individual interactions with the students. Cheryl?
Did you have any of the students say to you in spring, why doesn't anybody else do this?
Yes, I did. Well, I'm a little sarcastic in the way I teach and my humor, and sometimes that's great for students, sometimes it's not. I originally had a decision tree for my spring semester class where the question at the top was, should you email Dr. Shear? And all of the ends ended up with no. So I sarcastically like put it up on the projector. I was like, and like, you know, it's in the syllabus, or it's in the syllabus. Like it all comes down. And so I put that up there, but then I also was like, no, but I am here to serve you and help you. But I'm giving you the resources. That's my service. I'm giving you the resources so that you can do it yourself. And definitely had some students that came by and they were like, first off, you already email faster back than most of our professors do. So I appreciated that as a win, but they definitely said that they really enjoyed the syllabus and just the way I kind of had retweaked some things.
Just to let everybody know, she did have my old boring white box.
That was the university's boring white box.
Boring white box. And I'm very glad you made changes.
Yeah. Apologies, boss.
No, it's very good. I'm impressed.
Yeah. Jack?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So the Practicum that you posted on your slideshow is specifically designed for PhD students. As graduate students going into the master's program, a lot of us were teaching assistants our first semester, and for some, we have never had a teaching position before in undergrad and whatnot. So we're kind of coming into it blind. I was fortunate enough to be a TA 2 semesters prior to that. So have you ever thought of or seen in past maybe like a TA workshop or something, like maybe just in a 2-hour sit down with other professors where they talk to the first year graduate students and be like, this is like the responsibilities, like this is how you should like just kind of going through the swings of things. Because there were some things that I had done in my undergrad TA position that were not even close to being graduate assistant. There was things that I was newly exposed to and didn't really know how to react to. I was asked to like teach a full day of class, and it just kind of was not so much overwhelming, but it's like, whoa, like I was not prepared for this or ready for this. So have you thought of that or seen it?
Yeah, so Oklahoma State, the grad school actually has a graduate student teaching workshop. They also have an additional extra one for our international students that are going to be teaching assistants, because we do see a lot of times our international students struggle with cultural differences or language barriers, or just how to manage American students' attitudes. I'm going to say that nicely, in a classroom. And so Oklahoma State, the graduate school, provides some of those. In the past, I personally, at a different university, will remain nameless, asked for that for our graduate students, and they told no, and so I did it myself. So I offered the workshop, but again, it's a little blind leading the blind. I was like, well, here's my experience, here's what I did. So it was more of like, I wouldn't call it a workshop, because I wouldn't have at that time, definitely, and I still don't now today, consider myself like, I know everything, let me tell you what to do. But I shared the pitfalls I had experienced. I definitely think that's something we could incorporate. Jackson, our department at Oklahoma State. So that is something our department could do if we wanted. We can chat with Cheryl about that. I definitely think there's a benefit, especially when you're in your own college of ag. You could be a little more specific about what tools and resources and things you want to do with your students.
I just have a little follow-up question. I was just kind of thinking of this when you were in your presentation. Do you kind of switch up the teaching styles depending on like the groups? Like freshmen come in like eager but scared at the same time, and then you teach an upper level form management class where you have juniors and seniors that are just tired and ready to get done with their program. So do you kind of change up your teaching styles, kind of allocate it towards a certain group?
Yes, I don't know. I understand what you're saying by the word style. My teaching philosophy doesn't change, but my expectations are higher for my upper level class. I have a little less grace for some of the things that they try to pull in class than my freshmen do. Because you've been here, you know the gig, you know what we're doing, get it together, stop. So teaching style wise, I do, as freshman level at teaching, you have to be very clear, very explicit. Whereas when you get to the junior and senior level, now I'm trying to teach you like problem solving. So I'm teaching you a concept in my freshman class. So it's very like definition, formula, apply, calculate, what's the answer. Once you're in my junior, senior, I adjust how I teach. And instead of giving you all the information, I'm going to give you part of it and some missing parts. And then I want you to learn how to problem solve and fill in those holes yourselves. So as far as like the teaching approach, definitely change. Classroom management is also different for my freshmen. I'm a little more, again, forgiving, I already said that, as opposed to my farm management class or ag finance class, where I'm like, you're a senior, you know this. Get it together. So yeah.
So how many students are you now mentoring?
Well, I don't know. I have my graduate student, Hannah, who's looking to go into an extension. And so I'm trying to mentor a little bit differently for her extension goals that she wants to go to, which is still sort of teaching. And then I'm helping our department head with a PhD student who's taking over that farm management class. And so officially, as far as like mentoring, that's 2. But I'm very much, no one person should be your sole mentor. No one's perfect, right? And everyone's very different. So like my advisor in my PhD program was great, but he was not like a cheerleader, like, woohoo, I needed to hear someone say, good job. And he could not do that. Like, it's just not his personality. Like, I would look at him and I'd be like, I need you to tell me good job. And he'd be like, good job. But like, I need someone to say that to me. So I found a different mentor. So you're allowed to have different mentors. So I have another student who did the policy competition thing. She is not my student. She's just a graduate student in the program who came to me, and I was like, sure, I will try to guide you through this. So I think there's lots of ways to like officially and unofficially mentor students. So I try if it fits in my schedule, I'll do it. And I only sleep 4 hours a night, so I got room. But yeah, so I'm gonna say 2 with side parties. Yeah. It does. Yes. Yeah. Again, and these are things I haven't run by the teaching experts at the education department. I will put up something that is so wrong. Like I will do something very, very wrong, or put up something that's kind of controversial to the topic, and then just wait for a reaction. Or I'll like sneak it in there and like blow past it and see if anyone's like, wait, whoa, roll back. And so I've been able to get some attention that way. The nice thing is in agriculture, you can pull current issues in really quickly and really, so like you can get students when, if this didn't happen in Oklahoma State, like they restructured the finances, the tuition payment and stuff at Kansas State University. So you better those students couldn't do math yesterday, but when that tuition restructuring came out, they were like, I have to pay $400 more per credit hour. And I was like, let's do that math. Let's talk about that. And so we incorporate that in. So I find if I can figure out what they're passionate in and bring that into the classroom content, that is how I can get their attention the most. At the beginning of all of my classes, I do a getting to know you survey. They were always on paper. This year, I'm migrating to an online survey, so it makes populating it a little easier as far as showing the students their classroom, but getting to know like what they're excited about. One of the questions I asked this past year that worked out really well for the semester was, what's a hill you're willing to die on? Like an unimportant hill you're willing to die on. So like the Oxford comma, use it, you know, or like Ford is better than Chevy. I don't care. Like tell me something, an unimportant hill that you're willing to die on and debate. And I got some of the funniest responses from the students. And so there was someone who was very passionate about milk and how she was like, she hates that people call it almond milk. She's like, it's not milk. And so she wrote like a whole paragraph about milk and the dairy industry to answer that question. And so then when I got to a section of my class about policies, where government interventions, we're talking about like the milk industry is there's policies, right? Milk dumping and all that stuff. So I like warned her. I was like, hey, we're talking about milk in class tomorrow. You better be ready. And she got like a whole group like ready, prepared to argue back about which policy is better for producers, which one's better for consumers. And so if you can find a way to do that, it really does help get those concepts across. No one missed the government intervention questions this last semester, and I'm convinced it's because of my milk enthusiast in my class, not me. So, yeah.
We talked about accommodations, trying for students that usually
Mm-hmm.
face a struggle, and that inspired me to think about how manage to be fair. Don't let someone be because of personal struggle,
Mm-hmm.
any struggle, professional, but also don't put that out there in a way that someone else can take that. That doesn't really need it, but
Mm-hmm. Takes advantage of it. Yeah.
Like a real challenge.
Yeah, I'll say during all my interviews for jobs, and I tell my students this at the beginning of my lectures on syllabus day, I tell them my teaching philosophy so they can know who I am. And so I have high expectations, but I want to provide you the resources for that. But my last kind of pillar is that grace pillar. No one's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. There's nothing that we do is life altering. It's despite what we think. It's not. Like this is important, but it's not life altering. And so I think I was raised in a very traditional, like, you don't miss a due date. And if you miss the due date, you don't ask for an extension. You just missed it. Like, so it was really odd for me being a teacher, like having students come in and ask, oh, I forgot, can I turn this in now? Like, I was like, no. That was very early on in my teaching career. I was like, no. And now I've kind of realized that there needs to be a little bit more flexibility, at least in my opinion. Some people are still like, no, and that's fine. But as far as accommodations go and making sure the students who don't need it, taking advantage of it, I have found, because I also am that way, I'm like, oh, this kid's getting extra time, he didn't need it, or he's taking advantage of the system. Honestly, that number is so low for me that if one student gets away with it, but I was able to help 4 or 5 other ones that needed it, I'm okay with that. I still get frustrated by it, don't get me wrong, but I would rather be over flexible than under flexible with things like that. And I'll be stricter on other things, like this answer needs to be very clear. but I will give you extra time if you need it. And if this kid wants extra time too, sure. You still got to give me the right answer, but I'll happily give you extra time.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't, just to be clear, I'm not that.
Oh, yeah, no.
I was saying that I want to deduct time from someone.
Yes.
Interfere in any way on the time we get in exact, but mostly, for example, with COVID now, I had said, it was the first time I thought, and I said, if you get sick, I will do the recording, and then I had to go run. Oh, I want recording because I went to the weekend with my family and with that. And, or I had another type of injury, another problem of personal matter, and I just didn't know where to draw the line.
Yes, no, I struggled with that too, especially with my intro class where it was hybrid, where you could come to class and I didn't want to have to make that call because I care too much. And so on every individual email, I didn't want to like be obsessing about whether or not this student. So I just said, you can watch online or you can come in person. And so I just made the recordings were available to everyone. But that meant I did also then follow up and check who came and who didn't. And I noticed that the online students' grades were 20% lower than my in-person. And so I let them know. I announced the class. I sent all the people who've been attending online and I said, your all's grades are 20% lower than the students who consistently come in person. Hear me out. Come to my class for 2 weeks in person and see what happens to your grade. If it goes up, I'm gonna suggest you maybe listen to me and stay. If it doesn't change, go back home. It's fine. But hear me out and try it. And I got most of them came in for 2 weeks. Of those like 40-ish students that had always been online, the 40 that came in and stayed with the 2 weeks, 30 of them said, I'm gonna stay. And they kept coming back. And the other 10 went home and their grades stayed the same and it didn't matter and it was fine. They were happy. They still got to use the resources. The other 30 were happy, like, oh, I'm kind of glad she sent me that email. But the flexibility was still there. And I also found that students who still came in person benefited from having the recordings because they could go back and review and pause. And I'm like, that saved me time. If you go like, well, go back and look at that review question that we did on Tuesday. So I found instead of creating too rigid of a structure to begin with, I just make it available to everyone. Use it as fit. And I try to encourage you to use it appropriately. That's wonderful. Let's see.
Hannah, quick question. So your 1 credit, that's for graduate students taking. So graduate students earn that 1 credit for their credit. So, okay. Then there's some slight difference here. So, hi, everyone. I'm Na. I'm an associate professor of practice at the University of Arizona. And today I'm actually sharing my experience with the University of Kentucky. I earned my PhD in University of Kentucky. And since we're talking about teaching as graduate students, and that's how I trained in Kentucky, that's why that Kentucky sign is right there as well. So we, I agree what Hannah has motivated this question. And actually, when we do this, let me see, how do I go to, okay. When we do, basically, this is a kind of a study to follow up a practice that Kentucky has adopted to provide graduate students a manageable load of teaching experience. Now, the motivation has already said, but I think this quote did kind of summarize it beautifully. And this is a study done by Nyquist and the author in Seattle University, Washington. There's a Center of Introduction and Development. When they study about training graduate students as teaching scholars, they were seeing that at a time in their lives when they are particularly vulnerable, graduate students are confronted with multiple, sometimes conflicting, explicit and implicit messages. At the research university, the most contradictory or ambiguous messages concern the relative value of teaching and research dimensions of your academic life. So that is really the kind of tension there if we are trying to really provide our graduate students with teaching not only experience, but teaching expertise. There is a competing tension there. So how do we do it like in a manageable way, given that we know that traditionally, and probably is rightly so, that PhD program is supposed to train our independent researchers who can go out there, tackle some research questions and do some research. While we all know that if you are shooting for an academic job, that's part of your job requirement, while teaching is another important part, but we don't get enough kind of training there. So there definitely gap between, as the study pointed out, and our own experience pointed out, the gap between the focus of the doctoral programs and the work actually expected of our doctoral graduates. And there's a responsibility to provide grad students with a solid preparation in teaching to meet their future job expectations. And graduate students' teaching experience in study actually has shown improve. Actually, it's complementary rather than substitute or competing. They improve their methodological research skills in science, technology, engineering, and math. So that's in the STEM field. Now, what we are trying to kind of, or what I'm sharing with you all, is a model that we kind of explored back in Kentucky in 2012 when I was a graduate student there. And we were, so the backstory is that I feel like it's really student driven. My cohort just happened to have a great cohort. Jerry Penn now is in Louisiana State, and he is a main kind of a driver for this model as well. That we were seeing that for the jobs we are applying, we need some teaching experience on our CV when we are on the job. And looking around back in 2012, even being as a teaching assistant in the department seems not normal, which is not the right direction. So first of all, we kind of pushed, let's do some teaching assistance with some support from the department budget. And then it doesn't stop there, because we have PhD candidates come back saying that the one question they asked me I could not successfully address is that, have you developed a syllabus? So with that motivation, we were saying that, okay, we all know that graduate students are very time constrained. You have a dissertation to finish, you have all the things to kind of push on your research side. And if TA is not enough, if you do need an experience to have, like Hannah said, to design a class from scratch and to actually teach in the classroom, have that experience, therefore you kind of learn from it. So how do we do it? So we came up with this idea of 1 credit teaching modules. So this 1 credit, probably different from what Hannah said on the graduate side, is this 1 credit is an addition to our undergrad curriculum. So that we actually means the graduate students. So first of all, we got the undergrad director, undergrad kind of curriculum professors on board to give us this flexibility, those 1 credit slot. And then, so our grad students actually are proposing their topics that they want to teach in this 1 credit hour class, depending on their interest. So here are some topics that graduate students have proposed. Some are like competitive edge in the agricultural economics. They can bring in their research or their area of expertise. There is applied agricultural economics using Excel. That's actually, I studied that class. It's just motivated by some of our grad TAs saying that when they are TAing for the farm management, for that lab session of Excel, students lack the basics. So 1 credit might help to, on that direction. There are some current environmental issues, food policy. You can see that the topics very wild and open. That's the motivation to our graduate students. you can combine your expertise in your field to a teaching practice. And with this 1 credit hour, so the procedure here is once you have an idea, you do need to come up with your syllabus as a proposal, which actually we learned that we need to really kind of follow what Hannah has kind of experimenting in the Oklahoma State to add on that mentorship when graduate students are doing that. For now, when this model runs, almost all the peer-to-peer mentor. And once you get together your syllabus on the topic you choose, the graduate students, you propose to the undergrad committee, student committee, and the committee, the professors decide whether this is a good topic and is a acceptable approach. And most of the time they approve it, and then you go to teach that 1 credit hour for 1 semester. Okay, so from an undergrad curriculum design point, this model actually works for both the demand and supply side, is that undergrads actually demanding those courses because sometimes it's just short of 1 credit or 2 credits to fill in their requirement. And that 1 credit combination really gives them the flexibility. Even that they need a 3 credit hour class in their selectives, they have actually a pool of topics they can choose from. So that's how it really works on our undergrad curriculum as well. So we kind of have a support from both ends for graduate students to have this practice. So the study, so this model started in fall 2012. As I said, is pushed by the demand of the graduate students. And we are so lucky that at that time, the department head was really supportive and let us try. And since fall 2012, this study is down till spring 2017. So the data, the summary, is only till 2017. And by the way, this is a study published in NACTA Journal on the teaching as a graduate student. So that's what the data, I didn't really keep track of the data after 2018 when the paper published. So those are the 9 courses since basically in about 5 years, 9 graduate students have taught 179 undergrad students in 17 1 credit sessions and 9 different topics that listed here. So the study we are doing is basically we are trying to address 2 things. One is the perceived value of teaching. So so we kind of trying to kind of document the perceived value of teaching as well as the perceived effectiveness of graduate student teaching. We surveyed our faculty, 18 faculty in the department, and then we surveyed our graduate students. The graduate students are split to 2 samples. One are the graduate students who actually had taught in those 1 credit hour course who had this experience. The others are like graduate students, but they didn't really involve in teaching. So we have some questions we want to answer through the survey. One is, how do graduate students and faculty perceive the value of teaching in land-grant universities? So given our, of course, bear in mind it's very small sample, 18 faculties from University of Kentucky back then, and then 10 students who have taught in this 1 credit model, and then 20 other graduate students. Now, among those, with the value of teaching is just as important as research in land-grant universities, faculty 60% strongly agree. And if you count the somewhat agree, about 85%, nearly 90% faculty agree that statement. While from our graduate students, you can see that their value actually, their perceived value of teaching is not as high as faculty has perceived. Now, the next question is very interesting. While they perceive it as valuable, teaching is fairly valued institutionally in most land-grant universities. Faculty, less than 10%, strongly agree that. And then graduate students, similar trend. So I have this idea that as faculties now, we are really what our graduate students say when they are thinking about their career. So the perception is there, but we still are demonstrating a different value from our perception. So there is that gap right there. And then another question is, okay, I know that when we propose this idea, some concern comes from that, oh, we are proud as a departmental program that all of our courses are taught by professors, not by graduate students. So of course, behind that statement is the kind of a concern about the quality of teaching, right? So do we provide the same quality? We actually dig into the students' course evaluation of all the courses that graduate students teach and others teach. So luckily in our, in the Kentucky, at least back then, Kentucky's student course evaluation, they not only report your course evaluation, they also report the average of college, they report the average of university. So we can compare. So we pick the two questions. One is overall course value, because our graduate student did design this course. It shows the course value. So overall course value, as well as overall teaching quality. That's from the instructor teaching side. So there's no significant differences between our graduate students course, graduate student taught course, comparing to the college average and the university average. So the answer is yes. Our graduate student instructor can perform as well as other instructors. So that's that. And then we ask our faculty specifically on some of their observations about graduate student instructors and how faculty perceive the model as effective. So faculty perceive it higher. Actually, faculty perceive it much higher value. Not much higher, but slightly higher, but the OR think it's effective in several ways. The highest on faculty side is it have become, the graduate student instructor have become stronger job candidates. So that's the practical outcome of this. And then following that, they see the graduates are more confident in their teaching abilities, which shouldn't be surprising given the goal of this practice. Now, the graduate students perceive it, thinks this teaching model is useful to other agriculture programs as well, and also they also think, excuse me, have become themselves have become stronger job candidates. So it does have perceived value of this model. Now, we also want to learn more about the experience, the challenges and suggestions for the graduate students who went through this teaching experience here. So what are the main challenges that our graduate students identified? First of all, course design and preparation. Much is what Hannah has shared, like from how do you design the syllabus? How do you plan out the course? That is very challenging, of course, because we are not taught to do that. So that's the first one. And second one, time management. I think this is a forever theme when I advise my graduate students. Time management is just a challenge for all of us, right? So if it's a challenge, if it's a life skill, why not just learn it since graduate school, I guess. So then student engagement is challenging too, as a third. This is related to what Hannah is talking about conflict, about diversity, how to engage students. And so that is the challenge. Now, resources. Because we said this model, when we set it up, I should follow up how it develops now in Kentucky, but at that time, we kind of, is student driven. Those students who really kind of propose this model are very motivated to self-learning, learn on their own. And later on, I think the mentor piece is very important. If you look at the resources, the top resources that students are using are online resources and peer graduate students, and the faculty come following them. Faculty other than your advisor is the third most used resources, and then my academic advisor is a fourth, which makes sense. Your academic advisor maybe advise you on your dissertations, your PhD committee chair, but I would argue that all of us do teaching. So why don't the teaching part is a part of the mentor, part of this this academic advising? So there's that resource. And on the time spending, I think people do realize that teaching takes a lot of time. And so also more grad students, 60% thinks they spend more time than they expected. So, and then faculty and the survey already suggests some direction that for further improvement, I think majority does agree that before you jump onto a 3 credit hour, this 1 credit hour may be practical for you to really get a taste of teaching. And then it shouldn't be exclusive to PG students. I mean, our master students are capable to do this as well. So that is kind of this experience and a short kind of brief study on that. Or is that this 1 credit teaching model is valuable and effective. Students, graduate student instructors find the course design and time management most challenging, and a suggestion to improve includes to develop a teaching workshop for potential graduate instructors to provide more teaching assistant opportunities before teaching as primary instructors. So I think Hannah was sharing an even more one step further, not only a workshop, but it's kind of a routinized practice that graduate students can engage in very systematically and earn credit for that. That's wonderful direction. Yes, and that is the paper that we kind of published in NACTA back in 2018, and welcome any questions. Or we can save it for till the end too. Either way works. Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much for the great presentation. My question is, did you encounter any challenges for players on the administration side get this?
Mm-hmm.
Because from my own picture right now, all these barriers that I have to jump from. So then, yes, and how would you?
Great question. So that's why I mentioned that our department head at that time was very supportive. So once we as graduate students approached him about this idea to formalize this graduate student teaching, he said, yes, I'm sure behind the scenes, there are other things. One thing that I'm aware that make this happen is that we have a course number that can lump sum, almost is like an in-house course number, which do not need to go through. Now I'm as a faculty, I realize for new course, you have a chain of command to go through, approve, and offer. So we have an in-house number, and we actually can internally use it. So that's why there's a variety of topics are proposed, and as long as the undergraduate students community approve it, internally, the quality control, then it can be offered in our classroom. That's a great point. I realized then I went on, I find that I really love teaching. I want to go on. So I seek opportunity to teach a 3 credit class. And then I was told by my department head that that's great now, but you need to teach under a different number than the number that the course usually offers. So it's a big number, but section 1, and then you can be listed as primary instructor just because of that hoops we have to jump. Yes, no problem. Great question. Yes, Catherine. Mm-hmm.
So how did your department come to that as credit for civic station? We are 1 course is considered 10 hours of your how did the 1 credit course?
That's a good question. I a little bit forgot. So yeah, for graduate students, I think we are paid as a standard rate. So for example, 3 credit hour, if faculty teaches, there's a rate. If, for example, they teach in summer. Now it just boiled down to like divide by 3, 1 credit. So instead of graduate students earn credit hours, they kind of have a stipend associated with that.
Okay, so outside of this,
Yes,
oh, okay.
yes, yes. I think that's how it works. Yeah, yes,
Just to follow up, so
Yeah.
did I understand correctly that the graduate students that pay extra for doing this, or?
extra. Yeah, extra based on their, like if you hire part-time to cover one class, how will you pay that person? Yeah.
So if you have the 13 hours, then like the citizenship, okay, then get paid more here.
Right, right. So this is outside. So that's why this model is not a requirement on their current TA shape or RA shape. So if they are, so this is really a self-selection, basically. If they perceive this is very important for them, for their career development, for their job market, they basically show their interest, and then they paid extra. Of course, they put in a lot extra work too. Yeah. Yes.
So about an average of 10 in registered. Them to take the requirements.
Yes, I didn't think that much when I teach this course. All I focus is how do I present an interesting course. Now I think as a faculty, I do say it's very important to recruit students. I think that first of all, in Kentucky, so depending on the school, different models, advising models. That's where I'm going. In Kentucky, all our faculty share the advising. So that in that environment is very important for all of our faculties, not only the undergraduate search committee or grad, all our faculties on board with this model. So when they are advising students, when a student happen to need 1 credit, 2 credit, they say, oh, look at that. We actually have these courses, one for different topics you can choose. So that's one way. And sometimes students need 3 credits and they can combine 3 courses together to earn that. So that advising, from advising side, that's where I'm going. Now I'm teaching at the U of A. They are adapting a different model. They have professional advisors. So that is really to promote to our professional advisors so that when advisors are helping students, they know what these courses are for and why they're interesting, and yeah, to really pitch to students. Yeah. Thank you.
So we're going to start the panel portion of the session. And so we kind of have a list of questions and we're going to pose it to all 4 of us. So the first one is, do any of your institutions offer graduate students training in the learning management system prior to teaching their first class? The reason I ask that is if you have ever taught a class and you are unfamiliar with the LMS system, you're toast, right? Gradebook. There's people that I know that teach and they've been teaching 30 years and they still ask me how to weight things in the gradebook because it's just not intuitive at all. Plus, if students need overrides for any reason, if they need extension, on assignments, these are things that end up taking a lot of time from graduate students, and they're already overwhelmed just learning how to teach the content, how to engage. There's so many parts to it. So I was just going to ask you guys, have you guys either thought about it or do you guys offer it or require it? Now, do you want to start? Or?
Yes, I could start. As I said in this model, so basically it's really exposed to graduate students in different stages of how much they want to enroll in teaching. So before they teach a whole class, almost all the students have been paying for a course. So through the TA experience, that's when they are exposed to their learning management system. So hopefully then, when they started to design a manager class, that's not too much a hurdle to kind of jump.
Okay.
Yeah, in my experience.
Catherine?
No, we don't offer a course. It usually has a faculty member that will put grad students in the class.
Yes.
But
COE Education Center, they have a whole series of how to use our learning platform, all the way from like just the core to like the enterprise stuff, which is really, really cool, but it's really overwhelming to the grad students. So our department, as a part of the teaching practicum, we suggest here the 4, 4, 5 kind of video or workshop courses you should work through. And then I also share my class over. So I give them access to my class, so they can all access and I let them play around with it when the course is not published, so they can like actually completely experience them and not when they're actually teaching. And so there's both the university provides and our department as a part of.
For the first time this year, we are requiring all graduate students to complete at least 2 of the what they call boot camp classes on LMS. One is just the basics, like how do you add an assignment, just the very, very basics. But the second one is Gradebook, which is what I deal with the most in terms of freaked out emails. You know, like the students are saying that they have an F and they shouldn't have an F. And then you look at it and everything's weighted. It's not, there have been no weights that have been assigned. And of course, that creates student stress, which they then sometimes take out on graduate students much more than they do more established faculty. So have to make sure that you know, they're already kind of targets a bit. If a student wanted to try to bully a professor, the graduate student is the first one that they would try to do that. And I feel like the LMS sometimes sets them up a little bit for that. So I think that's something that is overlooked sometimes, but is really like very, very important. The second question I wanted to pose was something Catherine and I have talked a bit about. We had 201, which are intro section, and we had maybe 9 of those. And we had 7 graduate students teaching 7 different, very different courses. So while, yes, they were intro, some of them didn't do market failures. You know, so they were allowed to just choose anything. And so the courses were completely different. And sometimes they would matriculate into 301, or which is our intermediate micro. And they were like, well, I've never heard of this. I've not done this. So we tried to standardize the course, and we said, basically, like, here is a syllabus, right? I mean, you have a little bit of creativity license, but you have to follow this syllabus. These are the weeks that you should do it. So we created a standardized LMS course, and they copied it in, and it had, here are the quizzes. Here are your assignment readings or whatever. This is what you should be covering here, here, and here. So the graduate instructors, for the most part, said that it reduced their prep for the class tremendously, because the last semester they floundered the entire time trying to put content up an hour before they were trying to start the course, because they had all these other classes. But then Catherine, you had a different perspective, which I also found, but I'm gonna let you talk about it a little bit.
For our staff series, we also have a standard curriculum courses. A lot of our grad students teach that class. My experience was we give them the syllabus and we give them the material, and it ended up really hurting the foundation. And that may spend maybe a few of it that course, but when we had a set of standard exams also, students weren't doing as well on the exams. Trying to find a balance between giving them all the material, but also trying to mentor them, not fully just, here's material, go home. It's very challenging. I found like giving them all the material, and they just didn't have this.
Yeah. Hannah or Nod, do you guys want to comment, or you don't have to? Okay.
I'm a pretty big, I always try to do it from the undergrad student's perspective. That's what we're trying to do. And I always found it frustrating. I was in a section where the professor was just off and left field. And then meanwhile, my classmates that happened to be in the other section seemed to be getting what I needed. And so I'm big support of like course and section continuity. We need to make sure we're covering the same things. but I'm also big like academic freedom, how
Yeah.
I want to teach it, how I want to teach it. I'm lucky at Oklahoma State, our intro class, we have 3 sections that are about 200 students, but each section is taught by a different professor. But we are all, this is the textbook we're using, and in general, you need to cover X chapters. But other than that, it's up to us individually. And I feel like that's like kind of the nice middle ground from the undergrad perspective. We're all getting the same material, but the professor might just present it differently.
Great.
And that's just the way it is. But from a graduate student perspective, if they're teaching, I think providing a general structure to begin that middle ground. Maybe I'll provide you, here's the course text and the topic you should cover. But then there's a little bit of onus in that, like, I'm now going to create my materials.
And we let them alter the quiz materials, but we gave that as a starting point. Like, this is an example of a quiz so that you don't go, I don't know, as a 201 instructor, I was very, very hard the first couple of times I taught it because I was like, well, this is what they should know. And then if I had, I think a little bit of, okay, this is really like where they are versus where you think they are. I think it would have been helpful. They really hated me those first few semesters, but anyways, now you already answered, or I can't remember now. Sorry.
I think it's a middle ground. I think from student point, I kind of point out the consistency is important. I'm not saying that could it be designed such that all the serious parts share the same learning outcome. And then from there, let graduate students, if they have time, of course, to kind of innovate and to really put their creativity to achieve those same learning outcomes. So I guess, of course, there is if we are achieving the same outcome, then you should have a consistent assessment to kind of achieve that. But in the middle, how you get there can be crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say I also they do a good job of because there are 3 separate professors who teach the same class. They don't require it. It's highly encouraged that we sit in on each other's lectures at occasion. And I know Dr. Jones teaches right after the same class, right after the same classroom. So my students just kind of, and I had a resource for like a summary page I put together with my class. That was what we did that day. If you walk in, like, this is great. Can I have this? I was like, absolutely. And then I was like, well, we should probably do that a little bit more. It benefits us, it benefits the students if we take the best from each of us. And I think sometimes we so focus like on our little section that we forget. And I think we need to make sure our faculty and admins encourage us to cross paths more.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That is not a little bit off topic, but related to kind of mental graduate students. I think one of the very helpful thing is I have my advisor sit in my class, observe me, and just have a follow-up peer review. And of course, in the end, I got a nice letter too. Besides my student teaching evaluation beyond market, but that's like evaluation, like observing, class observation practice, kind of along lines of like synergy between different instructors in the same across same session. It's the same kind of a thing that I still really benefit nowadays, because in our kind of promotion or tenure package, you have to have in peer evaluation or peer observation of your teaching. So I enjoy doing that because I always learn something from my colleagues, and I think I always learn something when someone comes to observe my class. So that evaluation and come to our graduate student teaching mentorship, that kind of observation and hands-on mentoring is important too. Yeah.
Thank you. So what is your advice to current graduate students who might be aspiring to a teaching focused career?
Go ahead. I mentioned what? You mentioned some of your thoughts on the teaching focused career.
My advice for our students about career is why do I get so, like, why am I so mad about it? I'm like, sometimes there's a sliver in there of something I could do better. Sometimes it's bigger than a sliver. Something I need to maybe be a little more. So I think just being, I don't say grace a lot, like having grace for yourself, but like being able to be very honest, like maybe I didn't handle that correctly, or there's some room here to be better. I think there's always room to be better. So get thick skin, but be very aware of your own kind of where you might be failing. And then always seek out resources to then do better. The teacher market student NACTA is a great journal article, lady works at the national conference. There's so many things, there's so many ways out there to do better. In many ways. And so I just think don't feel comfy. Like my teaching vows come back and they're pretty good. That does not mean that there's not things I can do better. And so don't just be like, oh, you know, my teaching vows are pretty good, my syllabus is pretty, I'm a good teacher. That's not necessary. I think there's always room for improvement. So always seek out people to come and watch your class. Go find a class that you can then take better. Kind of things like this. I mean, I was disheartened when this started in the room with there was a lot of people, and that just then makes me sad because I think that reflects on our profession in a way that I don't love to see. So as a graduate student, don't give up and find the people who do care. They do care, they're here, there's people. So find them.
And also, going on the thick skin and learning how to your evaluation comments, pick the parts that are very useful. And a lot of that's one of the things I do with my grad students. We sit down and we go through we talk about how we do what not to focus on. And I think that's helped a lot. Even my colleagues still not. I don't want that from the side. There's no way of really and also, I really like how possibly within like their first pairings, and always thinking about this idea of closing. We always have to do these assessments of closing. That's something that's good to always do. Always be improved, whether that's by students or
What's up, great comments? I would actually highlight because before the meeting, we had a conversation about the teaching folks career. You know, teaching folks career in our discipline has many different phases in our field. And so first for those students, I will first say that do you understand the differences? So I feel like it's almost a good conversation. Or in Kentucky or Eastern Pennsylvania University, we have this preparing for future faculty program. Then you can learn more, especially for international students or scholars, to really pursue out understanding about the higher education system in the United States, a different level of institution, different level of position. Now, when you say teaching focus career, which level, what I want to kind of give the students enough information so that they see the bigger picture first. And then my next suggestion probably is explore. If they come to me and say, I want teaching focus career, but I haven't taught yet. Like, go teach. Maybe you will change your mind how the class, but explore it. And once they still like it, and then we talk about mentor, keep learning, keep kind of improve yourself. Also, add to another point of empty room, find your group, find your circle. That is your mental village. That is your people. That's who you kind of bounce ideas and improve together. So that's how I think this.
I don't have anything earth shattering to add to that. You know, I've been teaching 16 years or so. A lot of roller coasters. I still, to this day, my stomach drops when I get the email that are like, your class evaluations are ready to be viewed. You know, and one of the reasons I think my stomach will always drop is because of how much time we put into these courses to try to make them so good, and it just doesn't always work in the way that you want, or students are not, you know, they're not maybe as prepared as you had wanted, and now maybe you need to go back and add a module on Excel, for instance, to make sure that they can do some of the more advanced things a little easier. So, you know, just as advice, you have to teach, but you don't want to over teach in graduate school. So I've seen a lot of students and they'll have taught 10 plus classes by the end of their graduate career. I mean, it's like they're can I do this? Can I do this? And I'm like, all right, you've got your teaching experience down. Now though, can you go, you know, is there some type of teaching research? Is there somebody at your, you know, in your department that maybe you could do something like that with? That's, I think, a better use of the time than just getting class on class on class. Like, are you, you know, what are the other parts of teaching? And it isn't just teaching. You always, I think, want to be in pursuit of how can I do a research study out of this? How can I help other people with my results? That's the other big part of teaching that people kind of forget about sometimes. It's not just standing up there. Can you do something empirically motivated that suggests other people should follow your path? So I think those two things, it's harder maybe to do the second one. At NC State, if you want to teach 20 classes, we'll let you teach 20 classes. I always say though, you don't need that much teaching experience, right? There's also apply for the awards, right? When I was at UNC Wilmington before I was at NC State, that was like one of the criteria that we looked for. We were a teaching oriented school. We wanted to see that there was some type of either graduate student award or some type of training that they had participated in, whether it just be, I don't know, ours was like the Center for Teaching Excellence or something. Had you participated in those types of things? So there's a lot of different things that you can do kind of as a graduate student, but the other thing is start your drawer early of good comments that students give you. And when something doesn't go right and students inevitably email you something and it just hits you wrong in a way that makes you want to call your mom, open this drawer or the email, reread it and say, all right, this represents the best of what I can be. This is what I, you know, this is either something I need to ignore or do something with. The other thing is at every institution now, they have these teaching centers. Have someone come in your class and interview your class with you not there and ask them, can you give feedback? I did that as a graduate student twice. It was a little painful both times, but so helpful in terms of how they perceive me in a way that I would have never gotten that information. I thought it was easy. I mean, I had to give up like 30 minutes of a class. It was well worth it to get the feedback on the things that they really didn't like, but they would probably never feel comfortable enough to ever let me know that. So very honest feedback. So think about the teaching research piece, but also you need to get evaluated multiple times in multiple ways. And at least one of those should be without you there, but with somebody else there that knows how to facilitate that conversation effectively. I learned a lot from all of those. And also, like what they said, you need your teaching crew. Who are the people that value it the way that you do? And even now, I have found sort of my teaching crew. I mean, just the people here now. I mean, I haven't even seen you guys since DC, but I feel like I wanted to hug everybody the second I saw them because we've had so much positive interaction. So finding that group of people that makes you stay on your toes, you know, oh, they're doing this research. Maybe I could do something like that. Maybe I could look at like infographic syllabi and we could do some kind of survey with this and see if students prefer the short or the medium or the long. That's what I thought about with April's post. Do you know what I mean? Like all this stuff is coming up and I'm like, but that's the kind of people to surround yourself with.
Well, shameless talk. It's too nice credit. AAEA TLC session starts with teaching conversation. virtual, and it started from the necessity of pandemic. We really needed that. Now we continue that, and Brian has organized in the past year. And I think we meet online monthly, just chat about teaching. And usually there's a theme, but we try to attend to everyone what's going on at that month and try to address. So that for one, that's a great resource for any of the teaching of any faculty as well as the graduate students teaching. But for two, it's really that
That's right.
support.
And Ryan Loy, is he at Oklahoma State?
Yes.
He is the graduate student representative for TLC. I don't know if I said that title exactly right, but he's fantastic. And that's another way to get involved as a graduate student, is to, apply to see if you would be chosen to be the graduate student representative. Another really great way to get involved there. So we're right at the end. Did you guys have any parting comments, or does anybody have a burning question that they'd like to ask? Yes.
One of my main concerns is, well, what if I get into a career that for 10 years now? So I want to know to what extent you invite that and what extent you are doing.
Well, for promotion purposes, for the most part, you have to, depending on your position. If you're in a promotable teaching track, you have to have research of some kind. Which I would have done anyway, because it's just, to your point, I want to know what's going on, right? I want to know, okay, this is kind of what's going on with ag policy right now. Ag policy is one of the most fun classes to teach, but it's also the most challenging because it's constantly changing in terms of, oh, this is now being proposed. What are the potential benefits, costs? You can't know that unless you're looking at a lot of this research anyway. So I do think you need to keep your foot in the research pool, even if you're a lecturer with no research requirements, because typically they don't have research requirements, I think, for lecturers. At some point, you might want to go to a promotable track. So for that promotable track, you would want some type of track record. And if you're going to do AETR, get it in before January. They're going to $500 a submission after that. So if you've got something, I've got like 3 or 4 I've been sitting on. I'm going to get them all in before I've got to do that. But yeah, so there's AETR. There's also the NACTA journal. There's tons of econ teaching journals too. And they're, they all have, a wide readership with a lot of people. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize that part. Yeah.
Burning and ready to like, how do I never thought I would have brought it back to me. But it comes down to that inter-econ assumption that producers want to be profit maximizing, right? And sometimes we get so lost in our research, the econ efforts, like fancy Wednesday. What is your basic economic assumption of the business that makes all this work? Most people get that. And I find that the research helps kind of remind me of that. And you can I do a week in my class I do a week that's called Extension in the Classroom. So I bring in extension topics, things that are related to what we done in class. And I also do another week of research in the classroom. And I show research that's going on with our faculty in our department that cover the concepts that you're touching on. Obviously, research is past what I've taught in my class, but it shows, I don't know, I think it's important, and it also gives you the publication account digitally.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to email any of us at any time. And we will, if we don't know the answer, we'll find it out for you.